And we are live. Hello everyone. How are we doing on this fine Tuesday afternoon or evening rather? So a bit of news, people. Some news. You may be hearing a bit. My voice is a bit fucked up. I was sick last week. Still recovering the throat, but will power through. I mean, normally it should be fine, but just in case you hear my voice going a bit all over the place, that's because I was sick, unfortunately. Second thing is that it's a lot of discovery today because for starters, we are not only live on Twitch as we do usually every week, but since today, I will experiment with streaming on Twitter as well. So right now we are live also on Twitter. Normally everything is fine on the Twitter side. I just checked. So chat say hi to Twitter. Twitter, I don't think I think I deactivated the chat for Twitter. So if Twitter wants to come, they have to go on Twitch. But yeah, I'm going to experiment a bit with streaming on Twitter to see what's what, if it's interesting or not. So that's the novelty. That also meant extra novelty because I had to do multi-stream, Twitch plus Twitter. That meant that I had to change my streaming software. So I was on Streamlabs, I had to switch on OBS at the last moment, meaning that I'm on a completely new software. Oh, it's still a streaming software, and so it's mostly familiar, but yeah, some novelty. Inspired by Cardamon. Exactly, actually. Yeah, it's actually him who inspired me. I said, yeah, I figure, why not? Might be interesting to try. So we're trying. We'll see if that's if there's anything interesting coming out of it or not. But yeah, we will try. So yeah, that's the main novelty. We're on Twitch and on Twitter, but the chat is on Twitch exclusively. Like the chat on Twitter is deactivated, so it's only for view. Let me check actually if it appears on my Twitter, because again, that's the first time I'm launching it on Twitter, so I don't know how it appears on Twitter. Like, do I need to make a post about it? So I see I'm in like live, but I don't see a tweet about it. Should I post? Yeah, I think I need to post. Let's see. Hey, I'm live. Sorry. Like the discovery of everything is very exciting. Let's try this. Boom. Does this appear now on my main? It does. Okay, so now, I know how it works now to get. Okay. Sorry, end of the logistical issues / setup. So, I hope that everybody is doing well, that you had a nice weekend, that the rentrée went fine. For today, what do we have on the menu? We're going to talk about EU defense with declarations that have excited a lot of federalists on the potential EU army items, but also the differences, or rather differences of position on between France and other countries on how to use the money that the EU is going to be lending to Ukraine in the coming months, whether that money should go to to EU companies, or if it could be used, for instance, to buy American weapons. So there's an ongoing debate about that. Then we're going to talk a bit about the Hungarian elections. So as you know, in April we have the legislative elections in Hungary, which are going to be very interesting because for the first time in 10 years, over 10 years, 15 years, yeah, 15 years, in over 15 years, our dear friend Viktor Orban might be threatened and lose power. So there's a lot of attention around. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of something. Okay, I'm gonna put that there. Pretend it doesn't exist. Okay. And so everybody's paying attention to that, and the Commission is also being a bit careful and is starting to slow down a number of procedures, or at least being a bit more quiet on procedures that they have around Hungary because of these elections. So we're going to read a bit about that. And then to finish, we're going to read a couple of articles on the usual dramas that we have in the parliament, and most notably the ongoing feud between Manfred Weber, the chair of the EPP, the biggest party in the European Parliament, and his colleague, rather, Irax de Garcia, the president of the socialist group, and how the fact that they basically hate each other makes von der Leyen's life a bit more complicated than it needs to be. So that's the program for today. As usual, if there are other things you want to discuss, well, you have 10 fingers, you have a chat, or at least on the Twitch side of things. Twitter, you don't have a chat. I'm double checking, but normally you don't have a chat. Yes, you don't have a chat. So if you want to chat, you have to go on the Twitch side of thing. But yeah, so you type and we discuss as usual. So on this note, let's dive right in. Let me switch my window. There we go. Let's start talking about defense. The EU Army when. So our good friend, or at least Commissioner Andrius Kubilius, the commissioner in charge of defense, the first time that the EU has such a commissioner in its history, has said that the EU may need 100,000 strong army, leading to a lot of discussions on, oh my god, is finally the EU army coming arriving? So Andrius Kubilius says the EU needs to reform the way it handles defense at the political level too, and that the UK should get a seat at the table. So European Union Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius has said the bloc should consider establishing a standing military force of 100,000 troops and overhaul the political processes governing defense. The fact that it's 100,000 soldiers is not innocent. Why? Because obviously this happens in the context. We're in a context where there's a lot of doubt whether the US will stay in the EU, or at least stay friends with the EU or not. There's temptation. We know that the US wants to withdraw its troops from Europe in the short to medium term, because their new focus is on China. And as it happens, as of today, the US has between 80 and 100,000 soldiers stations on a permanent basis in Europe. And so the fact that Kubilius saying, yeah, we would need 100,000 EU soldiers, basically the idea is, yeah, if the US is leaving, well, maybe we should replace them with someone, and potentially these 100,000 EU soldiers could do the job. So faced with Russian aggression and the US shifting its focus away from Europe to go to China and threatening Greenland, Kubilius argued that for a Big Bang approach to reimagining Europe's common defense. Would the US be militarily stronger if they would have 50 armies on the states level instead of a single federal army, he said at the Swedish Security Conference on Sunday. 50 Shades... 50 Shades of Army, of European Army, yeah. I see you coming, chat. So 50, I still want to say 50 Shades, I'm sorry. 50 state defense policies and defense budget on the states level instead of a single federal defense policy and budget. Bearing in mind that due to the very nature of the US being a country, in itself, contrary to the EU being an international organization, the comparison has its limits, of course, because the federal states in the US, Washington, California, Texas, etc., they are not independent states with regards to international law, compared to the EU, France, Germany, Poland, etc. They're all fully independent and sovereign states. So because of the nature of the two organizations, one is an international organization and the other is a fully fledged state. Of course, the comparison has its limits. So if our answer is no, the USA will not be stronger, then what are we waiting for? Kubilius said Europe's defense readiness depends on three pillars: more investment in production capacity, institutions that are prepared and organized, and the political will to deter and, if needed, to fight. So indeed, the three pillars, we know on the production capacity that we have historically, we have an issue. We realize that very much after the war in Ukraine, where we've seen that actually we don't anymore have production capacities that are able to sustain an intense conflict, and so we need to reinvest into the military, to modernize our army, also make sure that our armies could be ready to the new category, the new kind of conflicts, or at least active conflicts in Europe. Institutions that are prepared and organized. We have 27 armies. How do you organize them with each other? How do you do logistics and everything? Who takes decisions? That sort of thing. That's actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest, obstacle to an actual European army. Let's be clear about that. And the political will to deter, and if needed, to fight. So the governance, who decides where to deploy this army, when, under what condition, etc., etc. If you think of a federal kind of army, 100,000 troops is nothing. It makes sense. No, of course. I mean, in terms of, that's what I'm saying. And the figure of 100,000, there's a basis. Basically, it's taking the troops that are present in the American troops that are currently present in Europe to secure the continent on the basis of NATO agreements. Say, we could replace that with European troops. That would be troops that are just there for deterrence and everything. That makes sense. That being said, 100,000 troops is not nothing. To give you a bit of comparison, the biggest army in Europe, currently Poland, has 215,000 soldiers. France is also around 200,000 soldiers. The UK, I don't know. I guess it's probably something between 150 and 200,000. But yeah, 100,000 is, you take half of the biggest army in Europe. Of course, it would be constituted from soldiers from all over Europe, etc. But reaching the 100,000 soldiers is not done either by snapping the finger. Bringing up the idea of a EU army every few months is tiresome. The existing treaty don't allow for it, and new ones won't be signed. It doesn't even have to be right-wing parties that have the problem. The self-image of countries like France, we say, I mean, then there's the idea, then there's the feasibility. I tend to agree that the feasibility of it is questionable. Is it also a priority? Then it's questionable. Is it a short-term priority? Definitely not. Is it something to strive for in the medium/long term? That's a discussion that can happen. And again, even if under the current treaties, that's debatable. You could argue that under a reinforced cooperation, so that means that something that is not under like the full treaty capacity, but something that you basically a reinforced cooperation is a group of countries of EU countries that say, we want to go further in one field, but we can't do it with all the 27 states. So with a smaller group, we're gonna go ahead and we do our thing. That's something that could happen or start at the very least as a reinforced cooperation. And then, of course, if you want to go beyond that, probably you would need to reform the treaties. That's for sure. But there, when Kubilius is saying that, he's mostly say, he's trying to also try to give himself something to do. He's commissioner in charge of defense. But yeah, I mean, when we're talking about the EU army, I'm a bit trolling as well. The EU army is the wet dream of federalists. Myself, I'm quite skeptical of the idea of the principle of a EU army, but there is something interesting to say, if we have to replace American soldiers for deterrence, could we have something that is EU troops that could replace that and secure, let's say, provide some form of deterrence? That's worth a discussion at the very least. It's nothing if it comes compared to replace the current troops. Just France and Poland are 4 or 5 times bigger than 100,000. Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, even if France and Poland are 4 or 5 times closer to 4 times bigger than the 100,000, would France and and Poland agree to dedicate a quarter of their army to that? Somehow, I have my doubts. And also, I mean, that's also the question of the distribution. Like, of course, in the current context, the securization of EU is mostly turned towards the east because Russia. Poland does not exactly, and likely would not agree to have its troops all over Europe. They will say, yeah, we are literally next door to Russia. We need everyone we have in Poland to deter Russia if need be. So probably Poland would not affect a lot of troops to that because yeah, we're already a frontline state, so we will keep troops there. We will keep troops there, and that's the same reason why Poland, for instance, is not so keen on participating to a potential peacekeeping force in Ukraine after the conflict. France and the UK have said that they would be open to send troops in Ukraine as part of a ceasefire. Poland has said that they would not, because they say, yeah, we need our forces home. So the question, if you remove Poland to start with, oh, you have France, you have potentially UK, because we're talking also here of a system where the UK would be participating. Could Germany play a role in that? Potentially. And then you have to add bits and pieces of other countries. Bear in mind that the countries on the eastern front, let's say, will tell you, yeah, I don't need to put soldiers elsewhere. I already have my territory to secure. So actually, it would be more a question of, does Western and Southern Europe have 100,000 soldiers to spare to put east or not? We change a bit the equation. And also, then the other big question in this is, how do you reconcile that with NATO? Because you could perfectly say, and that's part of the commentary that has been done in reaction to this, is why do we need 100,000 EU soldiers under EU framework and everything, where we have NATO? NATO is literally meant for that. So you could perfectly say, yeah, okay, we just need to reinforce the European part of NATO, which would make sense because on top of that, you want to bring non-EU countries like the UK. I would imagine that Norway would be welcome as well. You want to include them in this. Why do this for the EU rather than NATO? Seriously, when this right mind would defend NATO? But it's not a question of defending NATO. Is that, okay, let's assume that the US withdraw their troops. NATO still exists. They still exist. Within NATO, even if the US is the main force, there's not just the US. Actually, a majority of NATO is composed of European countries. So you could say, okay, the US is leaving NATO, removing its troop. Could European troops just replace? And then you just say, okay, it's a European part of NATO that is handling this, and the same thing, the same system works. There's the question of the duplication. That's the main issue. Oh, then you could say, yeah, but what if the US leaves NATO? Then, yeah, you can question, okay, what's the use of NATO without the US? Then it becomes kind of the EU army, European kind of army expanded to a few other countries. There's a whole other discussion to be had. What happens if the US leaves NATO? Or NATO ceases to exist? That's a completely different kind of discussion. But the idea that why do we need to duplicate something that basically could work under NATO, it's not invalid because NATO was designed to be a defense organization. The EU was not. That's the key point there. All right, let's continue. So merely increasing funding for Europe's existing defense setup won't meet these requirements, he said, in part because of a lack of unity. We need to start to invest our money in such a way that we would be able to fight as Europe, not just as a collection of 27 national bonsai army, okay, he said, borrowing a phrase from former EU High Representative Josep Borrell. Europe could instead create, as Jean-Claude Juncker, Emmanuel Macron, Angela Merkel already proposed 10 years ago, a little stab at them, say, hey, you said that 10 years ago, nothing happened. A powerful standing European military force of 100,000 troops, he said. When it comes to money, material capacity, NATO is the US, a country that claims that they want to have NATO is the US and doesn't want Europe to survive. It's a very, 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 very extreme simplification to say NATO is the US. That NATO relies on the US, that the collective defense of NATO relies on the US, yes. That NATO is just the US, that's an oversimplification. There are plenty of things happening within NATO that are not relying on the US. Everything related to standardization, logistical, common training exercise, etc. It's not the US. Yes, the credibility of the collective defense relies a lot on NATO, on the US. That's true. That's why I'm saying if the US leaves NATO, that opens a different kind of worm. But for the rest, it's not just the US. It's not just the US, or not everything depends on the US. A lot of things that NATO does is not just the US. Where was I? To help solve the issue of political will, Kubilius wants to establish a European Security Council. The idea is being talked up by French President Emmanuel Macron and former German Chancellor Merkel. I had completely forgotten that they wanted to do a European Security Council. Because the UN Security Council works so well. The European Security Council could be composed of key permanent members along with several rotational members, including the member states with the Council presidency, said Kubilius, plus the leadership of the EU, Commission and Council presidents. The proposed Security Council should also include the UK, Kubilius said. In total, around 10 to 12 members with the task of discuss the most important issues in defense, some of which I just mentioned before, Kubilius said. And not only discussing, but also swiftly preparing important discussions. So, that means you create... You say, okay, to manage European defense, so you create something that is outside the scope of the EU, because you have countries like the UK. But the EU still has a seat directly to it. You link the participation to the Security Council to a EU-specific not approach, but practice, like the rotating council presidency is something that is purely EU institution. Outside the EU, nobody cares about the rotating council presidency. And even in terms of international relations, like the rotating presidency it's not its role to do things on foreign affairs. It's the High Representative and the European Council. So it's a bit of a different thing. And then they do coordination that also already happens in NATO. That's why there's question of duplication. Like if you place yourself in a world where NATO doesn't exist anymore, that's a different thing. Okay, NATO disappears. Okay, we need something to take care of European defense. Then, okay, you want to fill the gap, you fill the hole that NATO has left. That's a different discussion. But in a world where NATO still exists, even with the US removing troops outside of the EU, of Europe rather, that creates a lot of questions. Now, don't you think we would have to reinvent the European Union as a whole to be able to tackle not just this issue, but also other pressing matters like immigration? I feel like there's not enough support from the member states to hand over the necessary lawmaking power. From what I've heard, the EU too many feels very far away. Well, I mean, the question is, you want to make... The whole question is, what do you want the EU to be doing? Depending on the answer to that, you shape your organization to do that. Clearly, on defense, the EU historically has not been designed to deal with defense. Because historically, the idea was, well, NATO is going to deal with defense and member states are dealing with defense. So the EU deals with civilian matters. So if you want to go deep into actual defense policy, because actually, like right now, what we call EU defense is mostly industrial policy or investment policy adjacent, not actual military stuff, because the EU does not have a competence on proper military stuff. So it depends on what you want to do. But if you want to go into proper military things, you will need to reopen the treaties. And there, that's up to the member state to decide, okay, what they want to do on this or what do they not want to do. So technically, yes, you would have to reinvent Europe, but you have to reinvent Europe depending on what you want to do with Europe. That goes with the territory, let's say. It's also doubtful that the necessary best personnel can be found. In Western countries like Germany, they aren't even enough applicants for their own armed force, so... more for Danzig, but... more for Danzig is another issue. But on the pure military personnel, I agree that's something that is... that will raise a debate, because like, on top of that, given... if we are still saying, okay, the 100,000 is mostly to replace the American troops in the EU, well, you could argue that also you don't need necessarily to replace all of them. Like, the US has a base in Belgium. Does the EU need to have to keep troops in Belgium? Debatable. Probably the focus would be to secure Eastern Europe, because that's where the threat comes from today. Send a few people in Greenland, for instance. So, if you're talking about the Eastern Europe would say, yeah, I'm not going to allocate people there because I'm from Eastern Europe. I already need to defend my territory. Thank you very much. So the question is then, how many people can Western Europe allocate to go to the East? Which brings the question of how many troops, the political willingness to do that, and I agree, especially there. I know there's a bunch of you here who are French. In the French context, I'm for Danzig. You know the debate. France is a world champion in saying, yes, we are the leader of European defense, but without us, let's say. So yeah, again, behind the idea that Kubius is throwing out there, there's 10,000 practical questions that need to be resolved. That's for sure. If NATO is disbanded, they could repurpose those troops. Yes, but the point, like, if NATO is disbanded, you're right. Like, for instance, the French troops that are in Romania as part of NATO, yes, they would. You could repurpose these troops to then fall under this EU framework. Bon, it's not 20,000 soldiers. How many French troops is there in Romania? Like, it must be like a few thousand, not more. French contingent, Romania, NATO. Let's see. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, 1,500 troops. So we're not exactly talking about huge amounts of soldiers there in any case. So you would have to bring more than what you already allocate to NATO. Your army would at best be a reserve army to disposition of member states for defense. But it could be more than that, otherwise it would mean a European diplomacy, and I think anyone in Europe wants that, except people that want to see Europe as a country. Yeah, that's another kind of one, but... I mean, you could even say, do you need that? Like a reserve army to the disposition of member states for defense. Given that we already have in the treaties to simplify a collective defense mechanism, Article 42.7, that says if a member country of the EU is attacked militarily, the other member states of the EU owe them assistance. That means that in theory, even without an EU army, the other country are supposed to send help. Again, we can discuss the scope of this obligation and everything, but if the EU is supposed to already help its own, if the member states are supposed to help each other, why do you need this reserve army that would be under which commandment, which rules of engagement, etc., etc. So again, the problem, as always, is one of duplication. Why do you need to create an extra EU layer if let's say let's take the worst case scenario, the Baltic states are invaded? What is simpler, that the EU deploys this reserve army, or that the French directly deploy their army? Bearing in mind that for the EU to deploy the army, they will need to ask the 27 member states to do so, with the discussing the mandate and everything. So you add layers. We fall back to the good old the good old issue of the subsidiarity principle. Subsidiarity principle is the idea that the EU must act at the level that is most relevant for. Like you don't ask the EU to do things that a local level or a national level could do very well. It only does what makes sense at EU level. I'm not even getting the European Federation. There's too many differences in the issue we have to solve first. Yet I do believe the current global situation is forcing us to find an answer to growing aggression of global powers. That is true. That is also why, even if there's, I mean, you and me, there's a lot of practical questions that Cubidius ID is raising. The current context is nonetheless forcing us to ask, to put things on the table, and also to start answering those questions. So even if we can discuss the feasibility of what exactly Cubidius is proposing, the context is forcing us to have this discussion. That is true, because we need to start answering those questions given the current context. That's, at the very least, that's what I'm saying. Okay, this is worth a discussion, and it needs to be a discussion that happens, even if it's something that needs to happen at medium/long term. I always thought the idea of the EU military would be the same idea as NATO. Am I wrong? You're not wrong per se. You're not wrong per se, because, like I said, initially, the EU was created with the idea we don't need to worry about military stuff, because military stuff NATO is doing. And even where in the latest evolution of the EU, if we take the Article 42.7, the collective defense mechanism of the EU, so the fact that if a member state is attacked, the other member states owe them assistance, the treaty directly mentioned NATO. The treaty does. Let me pull that up. EU 42.7 mutual defense clause. Oh wait, no, that's the. Voilà. Let me pull that up. That way you can see it. There we go. All right. Boom. So that's an extract of the treaties. So if a member state is the victim of armed aggression on its territory, the other member state shall have towards it an obligation of aid and assistance by all the means in their power, in accordance with Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. This shall not prejudice the specific character of the security and defense policy of certain member states. This is a reference to the countries that are neutral, basically. Ireland, Austria, Malta, Cyprus. Commitment and cooperation in this area shall be consistent with commitments under the NATO treaty, which, for those states which are a member of it, remains the foundation of their collective defense and the forum for its implementation. So, the collective defense mechanism of the EU makes a direct reference to NATO, saying, okay, we should help each other if we are attacked, and the way to deal with it is, for those who are members of NATO, through NATO. So that's why, like, they are, you're right, that's why you're right when you said there are links, that doing EU military stuff would be the same as doing NATO. Kind of, because the two are kind of intertwined. Like, whenever we've been talking about EU defense, NATO comes up. And the EU has always said, when we're talking about defense, well, NATO is the forum. And NATO has always been very careful to protect its stuff. Like, when the EU starts talking about defense, NATO is looking for, hey, careful, that's my turf there. You can't walk on my turf. There was like a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, a bit of tensions between NATO and the EU, because the EU was starting to say, okay, well, because of Ukraine, we need to start talking more about defense. Can we do something about standardization? A military standardization. And NATO instantly jumped on this, saying, no, you can't do standardization, because standardization is something that NATO does. Standardization, I'm talking ammunition, tracks, all the radio frequencies, that sort of thing. And NATO says, no, that's what we do. Do not make our life harder by trying to do it as well. So, again, as long as NATO exists, you have a risk of duplication on top of a risk of duplication. Because in the end, the question is, okay, you want to avoid duplication between what member states themselves, countries themselves do, and what would happen at the EU level. But you also want to avoid duplication between what would happen at EU level and what NATO is doing. So you have 3 different layers of potential duplication, and so more complexity is happening. If NATO disappears, well, then you fall back to, okay, we need something, we need a form of collective EU-wide kind of defense to replace NATO. Problem solved, kind of. But as long as NATO exists, that means you have 2 international kind of setting to talk about defense, and how do you make sure that they're not stepping on each other's toes. By the way, I've seen a debate on the Discord server about what is better between Calendar Set and Article 5. When it comes to defend other countries, I read from them that EU makes it mandatory to help other militarily, while NATO is more about what country find appropriate as a response. I'm not very good at this topic. Can you help? Oh, actually, it's false. Actually, there is for starters, there is indeed a debate on Article 5 NATO, so the collective defense clause of NATO, and Article 42.7 that we just see right now on the screen. Which one is stronger? Which one is better? For starters, it's important to remember both of them are not absolute. The Article 5 NATO says if you are attacked, member states must defend each other using the means that are most appropriate. 42.7 kind of says the same thing and also resends the issue to NATO. And that's normal. Why? Because ultimately, since we're talking about war, it's a political decision. And the degree of military response you want to send to a given aggression is a political discussion, a political decision. That's why NATO doesn't say automatically, you need to declare, everyone needs to automatically declare war on whoever is attacking. Say, you need to help defend the other. An attack on one is an attack on everyone. But it doesn't go into the specific. Why? Because it's a political decision. And within the scope of an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, the degree of response can be 10,000 nuances. And so it's up to the political level to decide, A, is the aggression worthy of activating Article 5? And 2, in response to that aggression, triggering Article 5, what response is appropriate? 42.7 would be exactly the same. It would be exactly the same in practice. 42.7, it would be, okay, we owe assistance. What does that mean, this assistance? Well, that's up to the political decision, which is exactly what NATO is saying. So from that point of view, it's exactly the same. Some are arguing that 42.7 is weaker than NATO because it talks about assistance. In NATO, I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but it's a slightly different wording that might be understood as stronger. There, my political interpretation of this is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's automatically the same. Like, I would argue that even if on paper 42.7, so the EU clause, could be understood as weaker as NATO's Article 5, in practice they are the same. Why? One, to activate it, you need political decision. The kind of response is also a political decision, so both are exactly the same. And in the case of the EU clause, let's take again the example of Russia invades the Baltic countries. What happens then? If that happens, the only viable political answer for the EU member states is to go all in. Is to say, we're going to go straight up help militarily the Balts defend themselves against Russia. Why? Because politically, if, let's say, France sees, okay, the Baltic states are being invaded, Riga is occupied by the Russians, you are fighting in the street, and France saying, oh, well, we're very much with you guys, but good luck. Good luck, but we're not going to send a single soldier. We're going to send best wishes. We can send you a few cans, some humanitarian aid, but that's it. We're not going to fight for you. We're not going to fight your war, but with you, thoughts and prayer. Politically, you might as well disband the EU. You can disband the EU immediately. Because the very idea of the EU is, the raison d'être of the EU is, we see the member states, the countries of the EU say, okay, we have a common destiny. We have a common fate. We believe that we are more than neighbors, we are more than friends. There we have a common identity, we have a common political fate. We owe solidarity, etc., etc. If at the moment, so with the idea that you create the EU, with the idea of the ever closer union, the solidarity, the common political, the common fate, and everything. So you hype up what the EU is supposed to be for its members. The very, very high level of solidarity. If when one of these countries, one of your friends is attacked, and logically needs you, is the moment where it needs you the most, and that your answer to this is, well, that was fun, good luck. The whole thing just collapsed. Like the whole idea, oh yes, we did the EU because it's a common, we have solidarity, we have a common destiny and everything. That's just bullshit. You just admit that it's all bullshit. And in that case, if the EU in the end was just about doing a common market, why did we do the EU and not just a free trade agreement? So from the moment you want something that is the EU, built on the idea we have a common destiny, solidarity, and everything, if one of us is military invaded by a hostile force, if you want the EU to survive, politically, you have no choice but to say, okay, we have to go all in. We have to go all in and say, okay, we're going to defend yourself. We're not going to abandon you. Otherwise, the thing collapses on itself. At least, in my opinion, I don't see how the EU could survive. Its members saying, okay, well, good luck, guys. Makes no sense. So that's why, like, the whole discussion, which is stronger between Article 5 and 42.7, so NATO and EU treaties, it's purely theoretical discussion. Politically, it has to be the same. Well, at the least, it has to lead to the strongest form of solidarity in case of attack. Otherwise, that's pointless. All right, and I was just missing out something there. Did I read this? In total, no run 10. Yeah, we read that already. I hope France won't like this and defend Europe. There are already too much surrender jokes online. There's no need. That's the whole debate on who's ready to die for Danzig. And I mean, that's if we're talking about a French context. French, yeah, I'm French. We love to say, "Oh yes, we are European defense. We are the ones who understood everything on defense." Blah 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 blah. Why do the other rely on the US instead of us? Machin machin. I'm an Eastern European country. I see the current state of debates on European defense in France. Do I want to stake my survival on France? Given that a non-negligible part of the French political spectrum would be very happy to sell half of Europe for a bit of tranquility, I don't know about that. Something I was saying on Sunday in the French stream. Recently, Poland, they bought submarines, and the finalists were between Swedish submarines and French submarines. The Polish chose the Swedish submarines. Apparently, one of the reasons why they chose the Swedish rather than the French is because the Polish look at the polls in France. They see the very high scores of the far right and like, yeah, do I want to have part of my military equipment depend on a country that would have as a government a pro-Russian party? Not so sure. Maybe I will go with the Swedes. Maybe a bit safer. But well, we'll discuss that in the article just after on the different approach to European defense. I won't blame them as long as they buy in Europe. And you provide me the perfect transition, because the whole question then is, should we buy European? So, previously on EU Bull Z, last December, last year, we can say already, the EU agreed to borrow 19 billion euros to finance Ukraine. To help Ukraine finance its defense. That was all debate, should we use the Russian funds, etc., etc. In the end, they decided to go for common debt up to 90 billion. And now there's a debate on, okay, what do we do with these 90 billions? What should Ukraine do with these 90 billion? And so Germany and France clash over buying US arms with the 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine. A majority of countries oppose Paris' push to restrict Ukraine spending to EU defense firm. So this question is a continuation of the debate that's been going on for the past 2 years on where should EU money go when we're talking about European defense. Sorry, just give me a sec. I need to. Does that work? I'm just monitoring the thing on Twitter. Okay, that works. And did I miss something there? No, I didn't. Okay, we're good. I go back to my page. There we go. Okay, so let's read. So Germany and the Netherlands are at odds with France in seeking to ensure Kiev will be able to buy US weapons using the EU's 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine. EU countries agreed the crucial lifeline to Kiev at the European Council summit in December, but the capitals will still have to negotiate the formal conditions of that financing after a European Commission proposal on Wednesday, so tomorrow. This sets up tense negotiations with Paris, which is leading a rearguard push to prevent money flowing to Washington amid a growing rift in the transatlantic alliance. French President Emmanuel Macron is keen to give preferential treatment to EU military companies to strengthen the bloc's defense industry, even if that means Kiev can't immediately buy when it needs to keep Russian forces at bay. So France has been pushing a lot for the idea, okay, we need to have two wider debates. First wider debate, the idea of EU preference, which is EU money should go in priority to European companies and not to non-EU companies. Even more so when it comes to defense. That's being the push of the French for the past few years, arguing that okay, we can't rely anymore on the Americans, or less and less on the Americans. We need to catch up on our not delay, retard. Shit, sorry, I'm tired. Help me, chat. Retard in English. I'll try to find another formulation. I'm tired. Bref, we need to catch up on the lack of investment over the past few decades. Yeah, kind of delay. Yeah, I don't think delay works in that sense, but doesn't matter. So yeah, we underinvested for decades. If we want to compensate that, we need to invest big now. Otherwise, we'll never get out of it. Hence why they push very much for this idea. When the EU is putting money on the table, that money needs to go to European companies. Well, there's also a little bit of self-interest, which is always the case, nothing new there, which is also France wants EU money to kind of give contracts to French defense companies. There's also a bit of that, / a lot, but which is fair. I mean, there's always a bit of that. That's fair that's fair. Let's say. But that's the French approach. Many other countries are not on that approach, saying what matters is that we get the weapons, and we get them now. And today, European industry cannot do that. The Americans, the Koreans, they can. They have the stuff. They can give us the stuff. Hence, the debate. One is based, so the French approach is more based on industrial sovereignty, while the other, led first by the Polish, is more a frontline pragmatic approach. Like, we need the weapons now. like right now, and I don't give a shit where it comes from because I need it now. Because like the Russians are literally next door. Hence, like each of these, I'm going to be fair, each of these approach have their validity. We can't say, oh, one approach is completely rubbish, they have understood nothing. No, each of these two approach have their own values. There is value behind these respective approach. They have like they reflect different realities, different perspectives, different experiences. Hence why they are different. But you cannot just say, oh, one of these two approaches is completely wrong. They haven't understood a single thing. Where was I? A majority of countries led by governments in Berlin and The Hague respond that Kyiv must have more leeway in how it spends the EU financial package to help fund its defense, according to opposition papers seen by Politico. These frictions are coming to a head after years of debate over whether to include Washington in EU defense purchasing programs. Divisions have only worsened since US President Donald Trump's administration threatened a military takeover of Greenland. Critics retort France's push to introduce a strict Buy European clause would tie Kyiv hand and limit its ability to defend itself against Russia. You could argue, indeed, Ukraine, you could argue, kind of need weapons now. So telling them, yeah, well, you could buy American, or you could buy French, it would be European. Well, it will arrive in 3 years, but it'll be European. Go Europe. I agree, both are understandable. One is long-term, one is short-term, but for good reasons. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean all funds should be invested in only one of those paths. Yeah, that's the thing. France wants all, if a very, very, very large majority, if not all of it, to go only in EU in EU industry. While the other saying, yeah, sure, it would be better if it goes to European industry, because after all, it's European money. But in the context of Ukraine particularly, if they need weapons that are available elsewhere, well, we're not going to tell them, oh, I'm sorry, you can't defend your cities because that would require a non-European weapon. Sorry, Volodymyr. And also another argument that is used by the frontline countries is to say, yeah, okay, even if you want to buy European, the reality is that on certain kind of weapon systems, the Europeans simply either don't have an equivalent to US weapons, or that equivalent is not as good. So in that case, what should we go for, the non-existing or not as good European equipment if something is actually doing the job that happens to be American or Korean or from elsewhere? What is more important, the flag of the company that made it, or its actual ability to protect us? Ukraine also urgently requires equipment produced by third countries, notably US-produced air defense systems and interceptors, so the Patriot systems, F-16 ammunition and spare parts, and deep strike capacities, the Dutch government wrote in a letter to other EU countries seen by Politico. While most countries, including Germany and the Netherlands, support a general Buy European clause, only Greece and Cyprus, which currently maintain a neutral stance as it is chairing talks under the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU, are backing the French push to limit the scheme to EU firms, according to multiple diplomats with knowledge of the talks. So it's exactly that. The other are saying, okay, everyone seems to agree, okay, ideally, the money should go to European companies up to a certain extent, while the French have a very hard position saying, yeah, no, it's only European. And then the other say, yeah, maybe you're pushing a tad bit too far. So EU leaders agreed last month to issue a 90 billion euro in joint debt to support Ukraine after Belgium and others derailed a separate plan to mobilize Russian frozen state assets. Over 2/3 of the Commission spending is expected to go towards military expenditure rather than ordinary budget support, according to 2 EU diplomats briefed on the discussions. With only a few days until the Commission formally unveils its plans, EU capitals are trying to influence its most sensitive elements. Germany broke with France by proposing to open up purchases to defense firms from non-EU countries. Germany does not support proposals to limit third country procurement to certain products and is concerned that this would put excessive restrictions on Ukraine to defend itself. Berlin's government wrote in a letter sent to EU capitals on Monday and seen by Politico. Oh yeah, my nose is a bit blocked at the moment. Like I said, I was a bit sick. The Netherlands suggested earmarking at least 19 billion euros for Ukraine to buy foreign weapons that are not immediately available in Europe. So again, priority Europe, and then 15 billion that can be used for stuff that is not there in Europe. The EU defense industry is currently either unable to produce equivalent systems or to do so within the required time frame, the Dutch government wrote in its letter. The French counter-argument is that Brussels should seek to extract maximum value from its funding to Ukraine. Which also makes sense. The EU is putting money, it's not to finance non-European countries. There's also value for money there. That's also understandable. Critics say that boosting Ukraine's defense against Russia should take precedence over any other goal. In the context of Ukraine, that also makes sense. It's very frustrating. We lose the focus of our aim, and our aim is not to do business, said a third EU diplomat. Another diplomat said that a potential French veto can be easily overcome as the proposal can be agreed by a simple majority of member states. So if the French keep going there, France is in a minority. Don't tell that to the French. We know that they don't deal well with the fact of being in a minority. And so the decision could go despite France not being so keen on that. In a further point of controversy, the German government, while rejecting the EU preference sought by France, still suggested giving preferential treatment to firms from countries that provided the most financial support to Ukraine, which is a bit trolling. This would play to the advantage of Berlin, which is among the country's biggest donor. I disagree, the money shouldn't be a subsidy for EU industry, but for the defense of the country. Again, the question is, what do you use that money for? France there is having more of an industrial policy kind of look to the thing, while the others say, yeah, no, that's not for Ukraine, dude. And Berlin a bit trolling, saying, okay, well, those who gave the most should get the most to Ukraine, should get the most back in terms of contract. It's not about business, it's about letting us grow European defense industry for when Russia will attack the Baltic countries. Also, the US is not a reliable partner. That's the meta. In the context of helping Ukraine, I would argue that the priority is to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, more than developing the European defense industry. Sure, we're going to need to grow the EU defense industry. Priority number one remains Ukraine must not fall. If Ukraine must not fall require some equipment, non-EU equipment, particular equipment that the EU simply does not do, bon, I'm fine with that. Then there's the other. So here I'm talking about Ukraine. If we're talking about EU defense in policy in general, so EU money that goes to defense outside of Ukraine, okay, there you have a different kind of discussion. Then say that you want to use subsidies for the arms industry, don't call it Ukraine defense. And that's what I'm saying, it's two different things. Like, we have the money that is to go for defending Ukraine, and there, I would argue that the priority number one is defending Ukraine. And then, leaving aside Ukraine, there are EU funds that are made available for EU defense, SAFE, EDIP, etc., etc. There, that's another discussion. And there's again discussion, France versus Poland, etc., on which part of that money should be used for European industries or non-EU industries. There, it's a different discussion. The specific priorities for Ukraine is not present. Yeah, I agree, but what the diplomat said about business is BS. No, what the diplomat says is exactly what we agree. What are you saying? Yeah, we lose the focus of our aim, and our aim is not to do business. That's... He say, yeah, the focus of the aim is to help Ukraine. It's not to boost up EU industry in the context of the Ukraine support financing. That's what he's saying. So technically, actually, you agree with the diplomat, Tenval. That doesn't mean that the point on developing EU defense industry is not valid outside the discussion on Ukraine. But here we're talking about discussion on Ukraine. That's the scope. What was that? Yeah. Germany's request for the logic of rewarding strong bilateral support, as originally proposed for third countries by the Commission, to be applied to member states too, Berlin wrote in the letter. Diplomats see this as a workaround to boost German firms and incentivize other countries to stump up more cash for the war-torn country. So, France wants to push its own business, Germany wants to push its own business. Again, fair game. Two different struggles at the same time, reducing US dependency, urgent, and saving Ukraine even more urgent. There's three, actually. You can add a third. You have reducing US dependency. And even then, there's a debate on how far should you go in this. Saving Ukraine. And deter Russia. Prepare for deterrence to Russia. The third one is not innocent because, for instance, the Polish, the Balt, they will tell you, yeah, I'm on the front line with Russia. I'm first on the front line, so, you know, I need the stuff now. So, I don't give a shit where it comes from. Because again, like, sure, I could buy a very shiny Rafale that will arrive in 20 years. Bon, Russia will not wait 20 years for the plane to arrive. That's also the constraint that explains, like, again, the France has a purely industrial approach to this, while Poland has a very frontline country kind of pragmatic kind of approach. And because also of that frontline country kind of mindset, they're not as strong as well on the idea of reducing the US dependency, because there, you can argue it's naive to an extent. They say their thinking is, okay, if I continue to buy some stuff from the US, that will incentivize them to actually help out if shit hits the fan. You can argue it's a bit naive, but that's also part of the equation. Because if the Poland says tomorrow, okay, I stop buying anything American, why they could say, okay, yes, I'm gonna buy more European, but still some stuff that's from the US, etc., etc. They could get a few more years of American support in their mind. That's, again, question debatable. Is it naive, not naive? Everybody does its own opinion on that. But yeah, that's also another part of the equation. The German approach is correct. Ukraine simply cannot adequately defend itself based on the grand speeches of some politicians. Greetings to the gentleman in the Elysee Palace. Therefore, it's only fair that this is at least taken into account to some extent. Where it's also tricky for the Germans or for others is that if you take that led to some like tensions between EU countries on that, is that if you only look at the value of the the stuff sent to Ukraine, it's a bit misleading because a lot of that stuff, particularly in the first years of the war, it was not like a brand new material that was sent to Ukraine. For a lot of them, including Germany, those were old stocks from the Soviet Union. The first thing, Germany sent a lot of stuff, partly because they inherited all the Soviet stock that they had from Eastern Germany that they would not use because now they were on the NATO standard. So this stuff was like just in warehouses, and then suddenly they say, "Oh, I can send that to Ukraine." They're using Soviet weapon standards, and so they emptied Cold War era stockpiles, ironically made by Russia, to give them to Ukraine. That drives the value up in terms of the money they send or the stuff they send to Ukraine, but actually it's not like as if they built new stuff, bought new stuff, or sent from their own army. No, they were emptying the old stockpiles, which partly explains why Germany and other Eastern European countries were able to send a lot of stuff compared to Western Europeans. And there's also some things that probably happened under the table. I would not be surprised if France is providing some military aid that's this kind under the table that you don't see in the public reporting in terms of intelligence, special forces, this sort of thing. I'm pretty certain the French are doing some stuff under the table that probably Germany is not able to even come close to. So again, like judging only the value of the help provided from the public figure, okay, you send X amount, the equivalent of X amount of money in terms of military equipment to Ukraine, and use that as a basis for this is the amount that you should get in return, is not completely fair as well. I think the German position is broader. A lot of money also comes indirectly from Germany, be it funds for the EU budget or the signing of joint loans. I think that's... no, let me reread the thing, but that's not how I understand it. Film from countries that provide the most financial support to Ukraine. They're talking about financial support, not equipment. So for starters, that would not include the EU contribution, the German contribution to the EU budget, because we're talking about bilateral support. The German contribution to the EU budget is not bilateral support. So the question is, what did the Germans send to the Ukrainians financially? The question for me is that financial support, are they talking only about pure money that was sent bilaterally to Ukraine, or the financial equivalent of all the support they sent to Ukraine? That's where I'm not sure now. That's why I'm not sure. Okay, well. Do we have any questions before we move on to the next topic? Oh, let me just check something quickly. Up. All right. We good. We be good. Up. Okay. Where am I? So, if there's no more question on EU defense and stuff like that, we'll move on to our next favorite topic, which is I don't know why I'm saying our next favorite topic. We're talking about Hungary. Also, a lot of Eastern member states send their stuff in exchange of promise from Germany to provide them with new stuff in exchange. True, that was part of the deals that were made as well. Indeed, that the Eastern European would send their old stuff and get part of the modern Western equipment as well. Yay, Hungary! They have an election coming in April, so we will talk about Ukraine, about Hungary in the coming months. You have to get used to it. So, the EU freezes Hungarian fires ahead of key election in April, sources say. Sources at the European Commission told Euronews that key files from cash to a spying scandal probe are frozen as Brussels awaits a crucial parliamentary election in April. Brussels does not want to feed Orban's anti-EU campaign by launching fresh procedure against Budapest. Well, they did launch new procedure at the end of last year. Now they let's say slowing down as the country is going into full campaign mode and avoid giving Orban most likely more stuff to base his campaign on. So the European Commission has effectively stopped making decisions over files related to Hungary, two sources familiar with the matter told Euronews. The reasons for putting sensitive decisions on hold is simple. The Commission does not want to be seen as interfering in the Hungarian election campaign and does not want to give ammunition to Orban's anti-EU rhetoric during the hot phase of campaigning. With the Hungarian dossier, the front lines are frozen and nothing is happening. The Commission is waiting for April to happen and is watching opinion polls in Hungary very closely, an EU diplomat told Euronews, speaking on conditions of anonymity. Indeed, this election is important for the EU because for the first time in 15 years, Orban actually stands a chance of losing the election, which I'm sure a lot of people in the Commission would not be sad to see happening. And because Orban loves to base his campaign on, look, Brussels is trying to impose stuff on us, and is behaving like the Soviet Union, etc., etc. He loves to do billboard. Every time he does billboard, oh look, the Commission does this, member states do Germany, France does that, machin, machin. Commission is being careful and say, okay, we're gonna stay silent, and we cross our fingers that it goes the right way. Hungary will hold parliamentary elections in mid-April that could see Prime Minister Viktor Orban lose his grip on power. The opposition I'm trying to remember. Tiso, Andros, is that right? Tiso, I think it's Tiso. The opposition Tiso party, led by Peter Magyar, is leading in the opinion polls ahead of Orban's Fidesz KDNP coalition, even if the gap between the two is narrowing. Sorry, my throat is kind of giving up now. What's the latest gap, Andros, in terms of polls right now? I think last time you were saying it was 8%. Ah, le t-shirt, you prefer t-shirt? Ouais. Andros says it's Tiso. So I obey the Hungarian of the chat. So, where was I? Orbán is running a campaign in which he often portrays Hungary as a victim of a campaign led by Brussels bureaucrats pushing for war, gender ideology, and open borders to allow migrants into the continent. Which is also very ironic because the Commission, I think last year, launched a procedure against Hungary because Hungary freed thousands of migrant smugglers. So they had captured smugglers, were bringing migrants into the country to enter the EU. And basically they freed the guys, and they said, okay, you're free to go, just don't come back. And we're not going to prosecute you, you just get the fuck out. And the commission say, yeah, no, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Like, you caught them, you're supposed to, judge them, put them in prison. Don't just say, yeah, just get the fuck out. So it's a bit ironic that he's saying, look at the EU making it easier for migrants to come when they themselves free migrant smugglers. Today the exact date was announced. April 12th. Cool. It's when are your elections? It's on Sundays. Let's see. 12 is what? Yeah, it's a Sunday. Where was I? Yeah, was Sunday. I think there's like most countries in the EU do on Sunday. Like there's only like 3 or 4 that do on different day. Like the Dutch do on Thursdays. The Czech, they do like on Friday and Saturday. Friday or Saturday. Italians on Saturday, I think. There's like half a dozen countries that do not do their elections on Sunday, but everyone else is doing it on Sunday. Which is why the EU elections are always held on 4 different days, because each country do it on its national election day, basically. Where was I? Yeah. We don't want to play into his hand, the source added, and opening or implementing infringement procedure could fuel that rhetoric. Orbán regularly slams EU sanctions against Hungary and uses them to lambast European policymakers. The European Court of Justice fined Hungary a daily penalty for breaking EU asylum rules in 2024. Okay, that's the thing I was mentioning. Still, Orbán has repeatedly argued that sanctions are worth paying to keep Hungary safe. We pay €1 million a day, and that's how much we're being punished for the border fence we built 10 years ago. A lot of money, but it's the best investment for our future, Orbán wrote on social media in July. Okay, so that's not exactly the same. That's a different one. He repeated the same thing during his trip to Washington, as he sought to emulate Trump's hardline politics on illegal immigration. They let them go because of at the same time the EU wanted to fine us for the prison being overcrowded, so it was kind of win-win, piss off liberals and avoid getting fines. I mean, to be fair, they will get a fine, but for a different thing. But I get that was good to piss off people. Orbán is known for his love of trolling. How long have we been streaming? So I can get an idea of how long my throat is holding. An hour and a half. Okay. So we'll tank. How many articles do I have here? Okay, I have a couple more, so I think I can tank it. All right. I'm just checking something because since I use a different software now, I'm just checking that I have the. Yeah. Okay, I'm good. All right, let's go. So the Commission's inaction around the banned Budapest Pride is particularly problematic after the head of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, declared herself an ally of the LGBTQ+ community after the Pride came under immense pressure from the Hungarian government last year. Last March, the Hungarian parliament passed a law effectively banning participation in Pride, threatening fines and smart camera surveillance. At the time, NGOs and activists called the legislation discriminatory and demanded EU action. And basically, they put pressure, or they commission. I think commission officially said that they were condemning the ban, and the Pride basically got around the interdiction by going through the mayor, by saying, okay, it's a city event, so you can't forbid that, and so they march, kind of defying Orban to stop them. You had like politicians from all around Europe that came, and the Pride happened. The Pride happened, even if on the spot, it was not supposed to take place. But I'm sure the Commission was deeply concerned. Yes, they were deeply concerned. I'm wondering if there was a commissioner there. I don't remember. There were MEPs for sure. I think there was a couple of ministers, but I'm not sure if commissioners went there. I think they decided not to send a commissioner. Budapest Pride EU commissioner. Yeah, there was one commissioner, Adia Labib, EU commissioner for equality. She attended the Pride. Where was I? So the legal text is a three-page addition to the Assembly law, but so far the Commission has not completed its legal evaluation and has not yet announced any legal steps. The Budapest Pride went ahead despite the ban from the government, backed by the mayor of the city, Gergely Caracsony? Caracsony. We'll go for that. Andrew, I'll let you correct me. Caracsony, talking to Euronews in October, described the European Commission inaction as a political decision. It was obvious from the first minute that this is completely contrary to European Community law. I am trying to understand why there is no political will to go against this. Maybe they are waiting, or maybe they are afraid that this process will drag on, and they do not want to influence the parliamentary election, Gergely Caracsony said. By contrast, the Commission was not reluctant to act on a Slovak constitutional amendment stating that there are only two sexes, male and female. The Commission triggered an infringement procedure against Slovakia in November last year. So clearly that was a political decision. The obsession of the Commission probably wanting not to give Orban an easy line of attack to play up the narrative of, look, the Commission is attacking us for making our own laws, etc., etc. So the Commission is also prudent about that because they don't want to feed the narrative of Orban. It's kind of a situation of damn if you do, damn if you don't. Because if they act strongly against what Orban is doing, Orban is very happy to use that to feed his own political narrative of, look, we are being bullied by the bureaucrats in Brussels. But if they don't do anything, well then it's giving the impression that they are okay with what Orban is doing. It's not the opposition is saying, oh yeah, we're not being supportive, etc. There's also probably in the new political landscape, since now the main opponents to Orban, Magyar, is conservative. He doesn't want probably the Commission to go on a crusade, on an LGBT crusade, because that would probably weaken him. So he's probably telling the Commission, stay out of it. That's better for me. The Pride ban was just an attempt to push the Tissot party into embracing LGBT issue, which they were smart enough to avoid. They did not even comment on it, like most topics, which would end up splitting their newly established company. Yeah, so they playing it smart. Because of course, like the So since Magyar in TISO is it's a conservative, they're currently in DPP. They know that to win, they need to get part of the natural Fidesz electorate. The normal opposition, like the normal opposition, the classic opposition, centrist, left, etc. They will probably vote for him because they want to get rid of Orban. The question is, how do you get people who currently vote for Orban to vote for TISO? And so yeah, Orban is landing traps to TISO so that then they could tell the voters, look, he's LGBT friendly and Magyar needs to be discreet to avoid being demonized to that electorate. The best LDPP and the Commission can do to help TISO is staying out of it and keeping quiet until election day, which seems to be the strategy of the Commission for now. And the DPP, and even to another extent, the other political groups in the parliament seems to be kind of on that line. Like there was, I can't remember which file. I think for sure on the Budapest Prime, that I think on another file where the parliament was doing a resolution and the other parties agreed to not put LGBT issues into the title, so that it could not be used against Magyar. And the other part, like the socialists, the liberals, the Greens, accepted because they knew that they kind of want Magyar to win rather than Orban. Why does the nickname start the same? I think he said that he's just using an alternate account. Don't ask me why he's using the two different accounts, but I think that's what he said last time. Where was I? There. So last October, Brussels delayed inquiry into Hungary spying allegations. Last October, Hungary's permanent representation in Brussels became the center of a scandal alleging that officials connected to the Orban government ordered its civil servants to use the premises to spy and gather intelligence on sensitive files handled by the Commission in relation to Budapest. The alleged spying, operational between 2012 and 2018, also tried to recruit Hungarian nationals working for the EU institution. And that's why it gets spicy. The Commission did set up an internal inquiry to clarify the role of current Health Commissioner, Oliver Wárhelyi, who was Hungary's EU ambassador at the time. At the time, the spy ring was operational and has worked closely with Orban, but little came out of it. So basically, it came out that Hungary's embassy in Brussels had spies whose job was to try to infiltrate the Commission. And the Hungarian ambassador, so the guy, the boss of the Hungarian embassy at the time, so in his own embassy he had spies trying to infiltrate the Commission, is now the Hungarian commissioner in the European Commission that Hungary was trying to infiltrate. This creates a bit of an odd situation, to say the least. And actually, there was a hearing today or yesterday, organized in the Parliament, where the Parliament wanted Wárhelyi to say, okay, what the fuck? You were ambassador and you had spies trying to infiltrate the Commission, and now you're commissioner. How does that work? Wárhelyi is saying, oh no, I didn't know, I didn't have any information. Sure. But well, he's obviously not going to say the contrary. The Commission originally planned to release the findings before Christmas, but Euronews understands this proceeding is also delayed possibly even beyond the election date. Commission officials who spoke to Euronews also suggested that a probe that would lead to the exit of Wari could end up creating a bigger mess as the Hungarian commissioner handles a small portfolio relative to his counterparts, is technical, and for the most part keeps to himself. A replacement could be much harder to deal with, one person said. Basically, yeah, Wari he's been put in kind of a cupboard of the commission. So here is a here's the portfolio on health and animal well-being. Here's a cupboard. Go in the cupboard. Don't leave for 5 years. Which can be convenient because you need to have a Hungarian commissioner. So you give him a shit portfolio, little influence, and then you just let him rot in a corner of the commission. While if you kick him out, you take the risk that then Hungary either sends someone that is going to be much more vocal and willing to use his position to make life difficult, or he could send no one, which would create, well, technically, I'm trying to think, would it be possible for the commission to function without a Hungarian commissioner? There was the debate at the beginning of mandate on that, and I think the answer is yes. If a country decides not to send a commissioner, the commission is not like supposed to be paralyzed, especially if it's a replacement. Commission is going to be, okay, don't send anyone. I don't give a shit. I'm going to give the portfolio in the meantime to someone else, and so Hungary will have no commissioner. Which is not in interest of Hungary, because that means they don't have also someone to relay their views to the commission. Spy is a misleading term. They were intelligence collecting agents. Intelligence officer is the official name of what we would call a spy. But they sucked. That's why the whole thing was stopped. And instead, they just trained the bureaucrats to be Orban aligned by default. That's another way, but yeah. By definition, an intelligence of agent is a spy. He works for a spy agency. Where was I? There. Financial decisions related to funds for Hungary on hold. Hungary requested a regrouping of around 4 billion euro, the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility, last December under the Hungarian Development Bank. Oh, wait. What do they call regrouping? Regrouping 4 billion euro, the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility. So that's the COVID fund. Okay, so they want to... Okay, I get it. So they wanted to have the Hungarian Development Bank handle 4 billion euro of the post-COVID the post-COVID fund. By doing it through its state investment arm, Hungary could technically fulfill the spending criteria and avoid losing this amount of funds. But the Commission is also reluctant to make a decision on the file ahead of the April vote. The EU has frozen most of its funds for Hungary due to rule of law concerns. It has lost more than 1 billion euro as successive deadlines to execute the cash went by at the end of 2025. And on top of that, there's like 30 billion euros that are frozen as well. The European Parliament has also called for additional financial sanctions and the suspension of Hungary's voting right in this resolution on the Article 7 review, voted last November. According to MEP Daniel Freund, the EU made a strategic mistake by not taking action, even at the risk of being instrumentalized during an election campaign. Strategically, the idea of not interfering is really bad, he told Euronews. There is no such thing as suspending the EU treaties because there is an election campaign. The German politician and member of the Green Party said the EU should call out what he describes as the lies of the Hungarian government rather than playing coy, which he argues could come back to haunt the European institution the same way the principle of non-interference did during and after the Brexit vote. So during the Brexit vote, indeed, the EU just stayed mum. They did not say anything. And afterwards, Juncker had said, that one of his regrets was that he did not get involved into the Brexit campaign and let basically the Brexit campaign go on a loop, saying bullshit about the EU. A spy infiltrate and steal things. They were just befriending Hungarian people working in the parliament and try to influence decision making through them. Not very different from what lobbyists do, in my opinion. Well, a lobbyist will not hide that he is a lobbyist to try to get information. He will go to you, say, hey, I'm a lobbyist. Do you want to meet me? Here's my pitch. Do you agree with me? Can you do things that help me? What the Hungarians were doing is they were sending people to befriend Hungarian staff, not telling them they are, oh yeah, actually I'm an intelligence officer. Oh, and by the way, can you give me that document that I'm not supposed to have? If you don't mind. And also do this and that. But no, I promise I'm not a spy. Slightly different than what a lobbyist does. Very slightly different. Is Brussels waiting for Magyar to smooth the ties with the EU? Magyar being the lead opponent of Orbán. So Brussels has a lot of stake with the Hungarian election in April. Viktor Orbán, in power since 2010 with a supermajority, is fundamentally opposed to key European legislative files, including financial support for Ukraine, sanctions, and the common migration rules that apply to all 27 member states. His policy of veto, which the Hungarian government now uses de facto in every vote, every vote is kind of exaggeration, has also created huge internal tension with the EU, where unanimity is often needed for... No, I'm sorry. Okay, let me rephrase that in a way that is more accurate. In the area where there is still unanimity, which is not the majority of decisions, by default, decisions are not taken by unanimity, they are taken at a majority, except in some cases, for instance, foreign policy, defense, taxation, citizenship, kind of thing that are strictly related to more sovereign powers. There you still have unanimity, and there Hungary does not hesitate to use that veto as a way to do blackmail, basically. Give me stuff, or I won't remove my veto. But it's not like the unanimity is not like the majority of policy decisions. It's the minority. It's the exception. It's an exception on very important stuff, but still, it's an exception. So his opponent, Peter Magyar, is a much younger conservative, a former ally, and currently a member of the EPP, and the center-right political group that dominates both the European Council and the European Parliament. Magyar is seen as more pro-European politician who could rebuild the broken Budapest-Brussels relationship under Orbán and lead to the release of EU funding, similar to the return of Donald Tusk in Poland. A source from the European Parliament, speaking to Euronews on condition of anonymity, said that TISO and the EPP are contributing to the EU's silence on the Hungarian files. Even the Hungary hawks inside the EPP are saying, let's do nothing, because Orbán will misuse it in the campaign for Brussels bashing. It's a mistake, the parliamentary source said. There is, however, one area where the Commission is ready to work with Orban: defense spending. Under the Security Action for Europe, so SAFE program, the EU decided last May to allocate 16 billion euro to Budapest, the third largest amount among member states, signaling that security is an area where consensus trumps politics. Is it though? Lobbies just plays by the rules of the game. Yes, that's a point. While an intelligence officer does so in more subtle way. No. An intelligence officer does not play by the rules of the game. It's not like he does it in the subtle way, no. An intelligence officer is not a lobbyist. He does not play by the rules of the game. That's the very principle of it. If we accept that we are drifting back into a Cold War-style world order, then such method will become a commonplace again. Spies exist. That's for sure. Yes, they exist. But spies from member states tend to not try to infiltrate the EU Commission. They are like more, let's say, important priority for spies. Like France, most likely is dedicating resources to Russia rather than infiltrating the Commission. And certainly not telling French people, hey, get me that stuff that I'm not supposed to have. But I'm not telling you that I'm a spy. So, yeah, no. A, spies and lobbyists, definitely not the same thing. And B, no, they're not playing by the rules. And the problem is not that they are spies. The problem is that EU member states, the spies from the EU member states are trying to infiltrate the EU to get information they're not supposed to have. Because that country is doing bullshit as far as the EU rules are concerned. Any questions on Hungary before we move on to our final article, which is going to be about Parliament, actually, and the small issues between our good friend Manfred Weber and Irax Garcia. I'm pretty sure most member states have spies operating in Brussels. It's part of the dynamic. Brussels has always been a place where you have a lot of spies. Because you have NATO, because you have the EU, etc. So it's a big power center. What they do, at least as far as EU member state, is more counter espionage. You want to avoid that, let's say, the Russians infiltrate NATO, EU institutions, and stuff like that. They don't particularly try to infiltrate the Commission. All right, let's go to the final article. Let's talk about our best frenemies. All right, did I miss anything? Let me just check that. Boom, boom, boom. On est bon. On est bon. Okay, let's go. So, EU Parliament's most toxic duo brings trouble for von der Leyen. Social Democrat chief Irax Garcia and center-right boss Manfred Weber's dire relationship is Brussels' worst-kept secret. A confrontation 6 years ago poisoned the relationship at the heart of the EU that remains toxic to this day. Manfred Weber, the powerful German head of the center-right EPP, the largest political family in Europe, whose Van der Leyen is a member of, knew something was wrong when Iraste Garcia walked into his office shortly after the 2019 EU election. Garcia, a Spanish MEP who leads the center-left Socialist and Democrat groups in the parliament, the second biggest group in the parliament, was accompanied by Romanian former Liberal chief Dacian Cholos, who was back then the head of the Liberals. The pair told Weber that they would not support his bid to become president of the European Commission, despite the parliament's long-standing position that the head of the party receiving the most votes in the election should get the job. So, let's move back. Back in 2019, shit, I clicked on the wrong thing. I'm trying to get back. Yeah, I'm there. Back in 2019, EU elections, Manny Manfred, leader of the EPP, was also, for the EU election, the Spitzenkandidat of the EPP. What is a Spitzenkandidat? He was the lead candidate of the EPP, meaning that he was the guy that the EPP wanted for president of the commission. And there was an informal deal between political groups in the parliament, so the EPP, the Socialists, the Greens, the Liberals, that was whoever wins the most votes, so whoever wins the EU elections, we will back as president of the commission. So, 2019, EPP wins the election, they get the most seats. Manfred Weber is the Spitzenkandidat of the EPP. In theory, the Socialists, the Liberals, the Greens are supposed to say, okay, we support Weber as we demand Manfred Weber as president of the European Commission. That's the principle of the Spitzenkandidat approach of the parliament. And then you get into a fight with member states because member states don't want yet. Basically, that's kind of the deal. And so there, Garcia and the Liberals apparently backstabbed Manfred, telling him, well, actually, we're not going to back you. Why? Because member states did not want Manfred. The nomination of the president of the commission is a combination of the parliament and the council, so the member states. The head of states and governments nominate a candidate for the presidency of the commission, taking into account the results of the EU election. In practice, that means that the president of the commission must be of the political color of the party that won the elections. And then that person is elected, voted, or not by the parliament. That's what the treaty are saying. Parliament is pushing that a bit further with the Spitzenkandidat. They're saying, well, since you're supposed to take into account the results of the EU election, if us parliament, before the election, we decide, okay, this is our candidate, you should not have a choice but to nominate that person as president of the commission, because, well, that was the will of the political group. They won the election, they have the democratic legitimacy, etc., etc. That worked in 2014. In 2014, Jean-Claude Juncker was the Spitzenkandidat of the EPP. He was backed by the Socialists, the Liberals, the Greens, who say, okay, we support Juncker as president of the Commission, and member states said, fine, we are putting Jean-Claude Juncker. But in 2019, member states, led notably by Macron, so the French president, did not wanted to do that. A, because they hate the system, but also because they did not like at all Manfred Weber, who was the candidate of the EPP. Because he was not fulfilling a number of the conditions that member states consider as very important for a president of the commission. For instance, the fact that you should have experience in the government, either as a former prime minister or as a minister. Ideally, you must be able to speak French. Important for the French. And Manfred was not fulfilling any of those two conditions. He doesn't speak French, and he has never been a minister, let alone prime minister. And so Macron led a campaign to pretty much kill the candidacy of Manfred. And probably Garcia, under the instruction of the socialist, 2019 was prime minister in Spain. 2019 Spain prime minister. Was it already Sanchez? That was Pedro Sanchez. So most likely Garcia, who is Spanish, got a call from Pedro Sanchez, prime minister from Spain, who told her, yeah, we don't want Manfred, so don't support him. And Cholos got a call from Emmanuel Macron telling him, don't support Manfred. And so the both of them went to see Manfred, say, yeah, sorry, not sorry. We don't want you. So they backstabbed Weber, which opened the way to von der Leyen becoming president of the commission. But yeah, clearly you could see the stage being set on why Manfred might have a slight grudge against Garcia. Just like he has a grudge against von der Leyen. So while Cholos is long gone from the EU political scene, Garcia and Weber remains in post, and the animosity between the two has only grown, especially now that the EPP is aligning with the far right to pass legislation. Let me go back to my page. Yeah, there. Garcia's move killed Weber's commission ambition, souring relationship between the two and threatening Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen's ability to deliver a second-term agenda, as she needs the support of senior MEP to pass legislation. The pair are like two toxic exes who had a good relationship. But Weber cheated on Garcia with the far right, and this makes it hard for the socialists, said Manon Aubry, co-chair of the left group in the parliament. You could argue that's who cheated on the other first, with the background of 2019. Today, the dire relationship between Weber and Garcia is the talk of the town. For decades, the EPP and the SND, the two largest political families in Europe, have worked hand in hand to provide stable majorities in the parliament, including backing a second term for von der Leyen at a time of unprecedented crisis facing the bloc. Now that stability is in doubt. Politico spoke to 12 officials and lawmakers who are or have been close to the pair. Some said the problem is personal, while others blame politics and argue that anyone in their position would have the same relationship issues. Weber and Garcia have become a problem for von der Leyen, said a senior commission official, granted anonymity to speak freely. That's because disagreements between their two groups could lead to less predictable voting in the parliament, as happened. As it has happened in November with the simplification bill on reporting rules for businesses, when the EPP sided with the far right rather than with the centrists. That's the new strategy of the EPP in this mandate, which is to ally itself using the fact that the EPP now has is kingmaker. They can choose the majority the majority in the parliament. If they ally themselves with the center or the left, they have a majority. If they ally themselves with the far right, they have a majority. And so the EPP, for the first time, is using this leverage to basically do what they want, pretty much. So on many files, on most files, they keep working with the center and the left because they have more commonalities than with the far right. But on others, for instance, on green agenda, agriculture, migration, that sort of stuff, the EPP is using the far right to put pressure on the center and the left. And say, either you align yourself with me, or I'll go with the far right. Breaking the practice of the cordon sanitaire, which was the standard of EU politics for decades. And kind of ruining the relationship between the EPP and their partners in the center. And has fed the process of the motion of censure against von der Leyen since the beginning of this mandate, so it's a whole thing. Tensions have also spilled toward von der Leyen herself, with Garcia accusing her of buying into Trump's agenda by pushing deregulation. Center-left MEPs have urged the Commission President to rein in Weber over his cooperation with the far right. Bon, it's, I have to say, I don't see von der Leyen going to see Manfred say, okay, Manfred, you're going to stop negotiating with the far right. Manfred does not take orders from von der Leyen, especially since the two are not particularly friends. So more often than not, von der Leyen is more spending time trying to do the back and forth between the socialist and the EPP, trying to salvage the majority, but she can't give orders to Manfred. Even if, on a personal level, von der Leyen is much more keen on negotiating with the center and the left than with the far right. She's more on the center-right line of the EPP than Manfred. Manfred is more like the right/hard right wing of the EPP. Where was I? It just understands how the left is trying to understand how hierarchy work. No, it's just the left is trying to push von der Leyen to make pressure Weber. Même si even if the Commission President does not give orders to the president of the political group, they can put pressure. And it has been seen in the past that the Commission President is putting pressure on his political group to do something. That has happened in the past. Hello, is there still such a difference between the EPP and the far? Oh yes, yeah. There's still very small, tiny bit difference between the two. Like, the far right kind of wants to destroy Europe. The EPP, no. The EPP is very much pro-European, and a bunch of them are even federalist. On the majority of topics, actually, the EPP and the far right are not aligned. Like, it's only on very specific issues that the EPP and the far right are actually aligned. Migration, Green Deal, agriculture, like those are the main topics on which you will see and to a lesser extent deregulation. Those are the main topics on which you will see the EPP and the far right having common positions. But on the rest, which is the majority of files, EPP and far right are definitely not in agreement. Where was I? Yeah. Verbal attacks in the parliamentary cycle, tensions over Spanish politics, opposing views on the EU green ambitions and migration policy, and the fact that the EPP is voting for laws with the far right have eroded what started as a promising relationship. Weber will never get over the big treason when Iraq State backstabbed him on the commission presidency, said a senior EPP MEP. Everyone needs to stay calm and keep emotion out of it, said a senior socialist MEP, noting that many lawmakers, including commissioners, often express concerns about the emotional undertone of the relationship. I'm under the impression that the far right is less against the EU now that there is a possibility for a far right EU. Alors, indeed, you've had a change or an evolution of the position of the far right on Frexit, leaving the EU. That being said, so a good part of the far right is far less advocating for their country leaving the EU, because there was Brexit. There's a bunch of things that happened that showed them that it was not viable for them to do that. But there is still a fundamental difference on the kind of EU that they want. And on that, the EPP and them are definitely not aligned. Like the EPP is very much in favor of the EU and also more EU. The EPP is pro-EU integration. You listen, the EPP talking about what the EU should become, the EPP will advocate for EU competence to grow, to the EU be doing more stuff, etc., etc., while the far right will argue, okay, maybe now we can tolerate the existence of the EU, but we want the EU to do less. And that's definitely not the EPP line. To an extent, like to an extent, the line now in the far right, as Temba is saying, is we're trying to sabotage the EU from the inside. But on that front, yeah, the EPP on the EPP and the far right have incompatible views on what the EU should become. Okay. Publicly, both insist relations are just fine. I really appreciate the strong leadership of Iraq State. She's a strong representative, Weber told Politico, describing the relationship as in a great state. It's fine. The relationship is on fire all around them, but it's fine. This is fine. I can confirm that we have good and regular talks to each other, but we also see our different political positioning, he added. Garcia also played down the perceived friction, saying the pair have a working relationship and try to understand each other, while stressing that despite their differences, it is much more normalized than you might think from the outside. The reality, according to MEPs and staffers close to the pair, is that 6 years of working side by side have eroded trust. Weber sees Garcia as incapable of delivering on her promises due to the SND's internal divisions and weaknesses, as it has lost power and influence across Europe. Garcia views Weber as a power-hungry and willing to empower the far right at the expense of the center. And also, the difficulty that they have is that they have no choice but to work together. Like I said, the center of gravity, political center of gravity in the parliament is not between the EPP and the far right. It's in the center. Like on most topics, the working majority is the classic EPP socialist liberals and a little bit the Greens. So they had to make it work because that's the format. You don't have a dissolution. You don't have an alternative majority. So yeah, they don't have a choice but to make it work. They don't necessarily like each other. The EPP and the Socialists and the Liberals don't think exactly the same. They may be pushing kind of in the same direction, but with different agenda, different ways of doing things, different priorities. But they don't have a choice but to work together. So even if the two absolutely hate each other, well, they don't have a choice but to work together. Because, well, you don't have an alternative. EPP, even if they're happy to use the far right on some topics to weaken the socialists, they do not want to make a proper, full-fledged coalition on everything with the far right. Even if the far right would dream of that. The far right would dream of dreams of an alliance, be a formal alliance with the EPP. And they constantly tell the EPP, yeah, drop the socialists and the liberals, go with us, and let's make a majority between the two of us. EPP is careful to say, yeah, no thanks. We will happily collaborate with you and use you on the topics that allow us to weaken the socialists, but on the rest, yeah, no thanks. In our September 2025 State of the Union address, and so let's just finish on that. So, because of that framework, not only do Manfred and Iraxte have to find a way to work together, even if they despise each other, but that also explains why you have von der Leyen and also now Valérie Hayé, the leader of the Liberals, who spend their time doing back and forth between the two, because, well, you guys need to sort your shit together. Okay, you don't like each other. You would happily kill each other, but we have to make it work. And so, yeah, you have von der Leyen and first Valérie Hayé, so the leader of the Liberals, who spends their time like doing the back and forth between the DPP and the Socialists. And then when shit hits the fan, von der Leyen also bring everyone in the office, say, okay, let's sort things out because I need my majority to work. Because they don't have a choice. So in her September 2025 State of the Union address, von der Leyen tried to bridge the widening rift between the EPP and the Socialists by giving policy wins to both sides and calling for unity. Yeah, the State of the Union, so that's the State of the Union is the big political speech of the year, where the Commission comes to the Parliament and says, this is what we're going to do for the next year. That's a big political speech. It's every year in September. We do it on the stream. And in this year, or rather the 2025 speech was really like 1/3 of the speech was, this is the stuff I give to the socialists. 1/3 was, this is the stuff I give to the EPP. Everybody happy. We're a happy family. But her efforts came to nothing as Weber and Garcia exchanged personal attacks on the hemicycle floor, each blaming the other for the instability of the pro-European coalition. Like the funny thing is that, so you had, so far von der Leyen had three motions of censure against her. 3 attempts to remove the European Commission, to kill the European Commission. The first one was very funny, or funny in a way, because it was a motion of censure against von der Leyen. And so when it happened, so you have the motion of censure, and then the leaders of each political group take the floor to explain what they think of the motion of censure. Will they support it? Will they not support it? And why? And it was very funny, the first one, so it was in July last year, because the motion of censure that is meant to kill the von der Leyen Commission, so it doesn't affect the parliament. You look at the speech of the EPP, or basically everyone, it was about Manfred one way or another. The EPP attacking the socialists, say, we are against this motion of censure, and in any case, the SND sucks. Iraq State, you sucks. Socialists takes the floor. We won't support this motion of censure, but Manfred, you suck. Liberals, we won't vote this motion of censure, but Manfred, you suck. Same thing for the Greens, same thing for the Five. So the whole debate on the motion of censure to kill the European Commission was actually about political disagreement within the European Parliament. So in a way, von der Leyen was taken hostage of internal parliament fights. On the second motion of censure, they kind of played it a tiny bit cooler. They did not attack each other directly, but the first one was really like throw just a bunch of knives in the middle of the room and they would kill each other. Weber accused Garcia and the Socialists of harming the European agenda. While during remarks, the SND chief shot back, "You know who is responsible for the fact that this pro-European alliance does not work in this parliament. It has a name and a surname, and it is called Manfred Weber." The exchange reflected a relationship under strain as the EPP pushed deregulation, weaker green rules, and a crackdown on migration backed by far-right votes after the 2024 election shifted the parliament to the right. Sidelined by that new math, the socialists have increasingly felt alienated and have hardened their attacks on von der Leyen for embracing a right-wing deregulation agenda and on Weber for empowering the far-right in general. The only way for Iraq State to survive is to be more aggressive with the EPP and with Manfred, said a former centrist lawmaker who argued that Garcia is leaning on rhetoric to rally her base as concrete wins are in short supply these days. For his part, Weber is unapologetic about sidelining traditional centrist allies, arguing that the end, tackling policy issues the far right has weaponized against the EU, notably migration and overregulation, justifies the mean. He could not be Commission President, so he has been pushing to be a power broker from the Parliament, which means he needs to show he can push for whatever EPP wants, which includes using the far right, a second senior EPP MEP, said of Weber. Weber and Garcia started their collaboration after the election in 2019, when the latter was chosen as the group leader of SND after serving as an MEP since 2004 and chair of the Committee on Women's Rights between 2014 and 2019. I had completely forgotten she was chair of FAM back then. For the first 2 years, they were united in their goals of delivering on the Green Deal and addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. But the relationship began to deteriorate in the second half of the term. In a mid-term reshuffle of the parliament's top post, so you have the election, so mandate lasts 5 years, but at the midterm, so 2 years and a half after the start of the mandate, you reshuffle everything. All the high-level posts in the parliament, president of the parliament, committee chairs, coordinators, all the power position inside the parliament, you reset, you change them. And so you have big negotiation between the groups to share this post at the midterm. The idea is kind of allowing different groups, different people to take over different kind of position and enable a sort of balance of power between the main political groups. So in the midterm reshuffle of the parliament's top post, Weber struck a backroom deal with the Liberals of Renew and the left, so the far left actually, to keep the powerful position of the Parliament's Secretary General in the hands of the EPP. So the Secretary General is the boss of the Parliament administration. So it's not a politician, it's not an MEP, it's a civil servant who heads the administration of the Parliament. And so you had previously a civil servant who was from the EPP, whose name right now escapes me. And basically, the EPP wanted to keep the post, a different person, but they wanted to keep the post, and they wanted to put someone who was from the cabinet of Metsola, I think, or someone from Tajani, someone from the an EPP high-level MEP. And the socialists didn't want it because they said, yeah, it's our turn to have the Secretary General. And so the EPP made a deal with the liberals and the far left to circumvent the socialists. With a very funny thing, because you say, yeah, okay, the liberals I can see, but why did the far left made a deal with the EPP? Normally, EPP and far left are not really on good terms. They're not exactly good friends. And basically, what the EPP did is they went to see the GUE, so the far left, and they told them, well, if you support us, if you support an EPP Secretary General, we'll give you a top job. So within the parliament, you have Direction Générale, DG. So basically sections of the parliament administration that are focused on different topics. Each of these sections is led by someone who is sort of politically appointed by the heads of the parliament, etc., etc. And so again, there is a power sharing. So the socialists will get that many heads of unit, the EPP will get that many heads of unit, etc. But it's mostly a deal made between like the member of the centrist coalition, of which GUE, the far left, is not a part. And so the EPP went to the far left and told them, well, if you support us against the socialists, we will create a new division within the parliament, a new DG, and we will give the chair of that new division to you. So GUE would have finally someone, high-level person within the parliament administration. I forget what's the name of this DG. I know initially, I remember the initial name because the acronym in the first version was DG Papa. So DG Daddy. And they changed the name afterwards, so it's no longer DG Papa. But yeah. So the funny, I like this story because basically the far left backstabbed the socialist to get a top job, which I find very funny because the GUE loves to attack the EPP on this sort of thing. So Garcia had wanted the job for the SND because the previous Secretary General was from the EPP, as is Roberta Metsola, who was about to become the parliament's president. This was a moment of tension because she really thought she would get it, and she took it very personally, said the senior socialist MEP. Her position in the group was also affected by that. She got a lot of criticism because, of course, she was telling the group, yeah, okay, we'll get the next Secretary General, and actually, she didn't. And so she was weakened. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's re-election in 2023 further strained relationship. Weber has for years been betting on the fall of Sanchez, backing Spain's EPP-aligned opposition, the PP, and giving them free rein in the parliament to attack the Spanish Socialist Party, knowing that the EPP would be boosted with an EPP party in power in Madrid. He does everything the PP wants, said a Liberal Parliament official, who added that every time Spain is on the agenda, it becomes a nightmare, everyone is screaming. Which is true, basically, also there is historically, within the EPP, you have historically an alliance between the German and the Spanish delegation. They are very close delegation with each other, and so they kind of have a power sharing agreement within the EPP. And so, because Manfred wants to get rid of Pedro Sanchez, he's letting the Spanish EPP do whatever they want, which led to some tensions. Because, for instance, like this mandate back in November, when there was the hearings to nominate, for the nomination of the new commissioners, when there was the hearing of Teresa Ribera, the Spanish commissioner, socialist, it turned into a fist fight because the EPP allowed the Spanish EPP to do national politics. So basically, you had the Spanish EPP attacking Ribera non-stop on the basis of national politics. You had the Valencia flooding and everything and all that, and even keeping Teresa Ribera hostage to basically serve the national interest, which created a lot of tension because you're like, yeah, okay, you're doing Spanish politics, that's not the place to do that. You're making everyone's life complicated because we are witnessing a fight between the Spanish socialist and the Spanish EPP, which is not what is supposed to happen there. Which tends to piss off everyone that you know Spanish and Manfred. Okay, so the most recent example came in November when the EPP sided with far-right groups to cancel a parliamentary visit. Okay, that's not the same. Cancel a parliamentary visit to Italy to monitor the rule of law in the country, while approving one to Spain, sparking an outcry from Garcia, whom EPP MEP frame as Sanchez's lieutenant in Brussels. It generates a toxic dynamic, echoed the first senior EPP MEP. The Spanish issue came to the fore during the 2024 hearing for... it's not last November, it's the November year... I'm forgetting that we are in 2026. No, the election was in 2024, so the hearings were in November 2024. Sorry, my bad. I suck at calendars. So the Spanish issue came to the fore during the 2024 hearings for commissioners when MEPs grilled prospective office holders to see if they are up to the task. Under pressure from his Spanish peers, Weber and the EPP went in hard on Sanchez's deputy Teresa Ribera, blaming her for deadly floods in Valencia in October 2024. Pulling under the rug that Valencia is still under EPP control, and there's a lot of allegation that the leading guy in Valencia, who is EPP, Spanish EPP, kind of contributed a lot to the situation, and so they wanted to divert direct attention on Ribera. While the EPP wanted to take down Ribera, the socialists hoped to make life difficult for Italy's Raffaele Fitto, who was put forward by Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who is not EPP. Okay, while Fitto is not from the EPP, he's from the ECR, so the alt-right, his nomination was supported by Weber. In the end, the SND went easier on Fitto in order to save Ribera from further attacks, and also because Garcia got orders from Pedro Sanchez. After weeks of tensions, with both Weber and Garcia visibly furious and blasting each other in briefings to the press, both Ribera and Fitto were confirmed as commissioners. The struggle highlighted that the old alliance between the EPP and the SND was cracking, with Weber snubbing Garcia and instead teaming up with the far right. While this team met to coordinate parliamentary business, often alongside Renew leader Valérie Ayé and von der Leyen, the partnership is far less effective than before. See you, Camille. See you on Friday then for the stream in French. It's very clear that they're no longer running the parliament the way they used to, said the left's Aubry. The breakdown has injected instability into the parliament, with the once well-oiled duo no longer pre-cooking decisions, making outcomes more unpredictable. Aubry said meetings of group leaders used to take place with a deal already struck. Political theater, as she puts it. Now we walk in and don't know where we'll end up, Aubry added. While they get along personally, the result of that cooperation are not that good, said the second EPP MEP, adding that the alliance between the EPP and the SND has not really delivered. Sorry. few more paragraphs and then my voice will die. How long have we been at it? 2 hours 30? Yeah, that's fine. All right. The next reshuffle of top parliament job is in 2027. And Weber and Garcia are already haggling over who will get to nominate the next parliament's president. The EPP is expected to try to push for Metsola getting a third term, which would be a first, but the Socialists claim it's their turn per a power-sharing agreement after the 2024 election. Officials from the EPP denied that such an agreement exists, while officials from Renew and the SND say it does, although no one could show Politico any documentation. The tradition is indeed that there is you alternate. Traditionally, so like I said, midterm, you change, you reshuffle everything. Traditionally, you do not allow a political group to keep the presidency of the parliament more than 2 terms. So 2 times 2 years and a half, so 5 years in total. You alternate. And so in theory, given that Metsola already will have done 5 years of mandate as president of the parliament, traditionally, indeed, the job is supposed to go to another group. Most likely, it would have been the Socialist. But the EPP does not want that. Because they want to piss off the Socialist. And 2, because if they were to give that to the Socialist, that would mean that suddenly the Socialist would lead 2 of the 3 EU institutions. You have the 3 main EU institutions, Commission, Parliament, Council. Currently, so von der Leyen, President of the Commission, EPP. Roberta Metsola, President of the European Parliament, EPP. Antonio Costa, Socialist, President of the Council. And if you change, so Metsola disappear and becomes a Socialist, that means that the Socialists would lead 2 out of the 3 main EU institutions, which the EPP doesn't want, because they say, we won the election, we are it's again the EPP trying to assert dominance. We won, the SND lost the election, and also they are in a minority in the council, like you have like 4 socialist governments. Why should they add to EU institutions? That should remain with us, especially since Costa is staying in the council. So most likely it's why the EPP is doing this to try to keep the socialists on the back foot within the balance of power of EU institutions. And also potentially propping up Metsola further. I would not be surprised if in 2019, sorry. No, 2029, yeah, that was the one. So the next EU election, I will not be surprised if the EPP is pushing Metsola as the next president of the Commission. Or at least Spitzenkandidat. That's a major headache for Garcia. The SND's Italian and German delegation are itching to get leadership position, and if the parliament presidency is off the table, they could try to replace her as the party chief. With tension simmering, one parliament official close to the pair half-joked that Garcia and Weber should settle things over an after-work drink, but it seems the détente will have to wait. I'd definitely go for a drink, Weber said in a nervous laugh before noting that both are so busy it probably won't happen. Garcia, also laughing, was even less committal. I've become a real homebody, I don't go out for drinks anymore. Pas fun, Iraksté. So yeah, we have the dysfunctional couple leading the parliament and making our dear parliament as unstable as ever. That was the final article for today. Any questions on that or on other stuff before I conclude for today and let my voice die in a ditch? Up, I'll do the program for next week otherwise. So last round of question, if any. Otherwise, we conclude. Up. None from you. Well, then, if there are no more questions, let's dive into the... It's annoying because now I have to switch between different tabs compared to before. All right, conclusion. Next time I see you on Friday in French for the news review in French. It's going to be on Friday at 5. I also see you on Saturday afternoon at 2. Not here, but on the channel of Carte du Monde. Streamer friend who does stuff on geopolitics. I will be on his channel for an interview on Saturday from 2 p.m. So 2 in the afternoon. It will be in French as well. So if you miss me already during the weekend, you can go on the channel of Carte and you'll see me for an interview. We'll talk about Europe's place in the world and stuff. Is going to be interesting. We'll talk Greenland. We'll talk about plenty of things. It's going to be great. And otherwise, well, as usual, I hope that you like what you saw. That was interesting and everything. As usual, for those who are on Twitch, if you like what you saw, do follow the channel. If you have a Prime lying around, do toss a coin to your streamer. That would be much appreciated. For the people on Twitter, I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know if that works for you. The fact that I stream on Twitter as well. Drop a comment or something. It's good to have feedback. But yeah, from now on, when I stream, it will also be on Twitter at the same time. And on this note, yeah, I think we've covered everything. Oh yeah, I'm gonna put in the chat as usual the Discord and everything for people. There we go. And yeah, on this note, I wish you all a good evening, and I will see you on Friday or Saturday in French. Bye everyone. Have a good one.